Hello everyone and welcome to my latest video. In this video I will be showing you how I paint the cloak of Adrax Agatone. Now for the inside of the cloak I am starting off with, Vallejo model color black or black primer as the undercoat. And keep it on your wet palette, just for corrections, stuff like that, shadows. I'm using German grey, neutral grey and a little bit of pale grey blue. Now as you can see I'm starting off with the cloak still attached to the model, but I did keep it separate. I did not glue it immediately because I wanted to paint the inside, and well, his legs block a lot of your access. So I kept it attached with a little bit of putty, but I will remove it from the model in a bit. And as you can see, it is now removed from the body, and I'm just only painting the cloak now. But by keeping the cloak attached to the model for the first steps, just to get some paint on there, it gives a good indication of where to place your colors, basically, where your light is coming from. So what is going to be the lightest point of the cloak. And now it's easier for me to pick out, well, everything and create the texture on the inside that I want. Now I wanted a really rough cloak, rough textured cloak. It is a lizard skin, so it's not perfectly smooth, it's not cured, the scales are still on the outside, so I really needed a rough texture. So I'm using a bit of an older brush for this. It does not really have a sharp tip anymore, and in the later stages of the cloak I'm using an even older brush, which has no tip anymore. But you see me make really fast, rough, bit of strange, roundish texture marks. And to start with, it's gonna look a bit strange. It's gonna look too textured. You can see really rough transitions between the colors as well, but that will clear up in the end. So I am starting off with mostly German grey and neutral grey. What I'm also doing is, for example, when I pick up some neutral grey and I want to transition that already a little bit into the German grey, I dip my brush into both paints. So for example, I pick up some neutral grey, I pick up some German grey, and then I mix it on my thumb. And this already gives you an in-between color, a mixed color, which you can then add to the cloak as well. And you won't get the same mix every single time you do this, but that's okay. Especially because I want a textured cloak. It doesn't matter if there's a little bit of a different color on a different spot on the cloak. It's not a problem. With these mixes as well, they will be, because it's such tiny amounts of paints, they will be close enough together that the difference is negligible. Now I've switched to a brush with a little bit of a better tip here, just because I am putting in pretty sharp marks with the neutral grey over complete German grey. And that's okay. They look really sharp right now. Not really, like you might want them to look. I mean, I want rough, but this is very rough. But it will clear up in the end. And this is a good way to already get some good color down and get some of that texture shining through at the end. Because if I make things too smooth now, then when I go over it in the later stages with the stippling with the older brush, then you won't see any texture anymore and you'll just make things completely smooth. And that's the opposite of what I want. So as you can see in the sculpt, the cloak already has some dents sculpted in here and there. And what I'm doing is because of how the light hits that cloak, or how I want the light to hit that cloak, I'm picking out the underside of those dents with the lighter colors. And this really makes them pop more. It really makes them look like dents even more than they already do. Because the top side is shadow that catches no light, that's falling inwards. And then the bottom side is curving outwards, so that catches light. And as you can see on the screen, I'm not making nice lines next to each other. For example, I'm really moving the brush around a lot, making round marks, straight lines, sideways lines, crosses, things like that. Don't go overboard with the crosses, that looks unnatural, but just make textured marks. Don't make it smooth, don't group them up too much together, but not too far apart either. Just make it look like you want it to look. And don't worry if you think it's too rough. You can still go over it. I mean, the first layer I put down did not look good at all, but it is already looking better because I go over it multiple times with the neutral gray and just fill in dark spots that I think look weird. Or if I think a spot is too light and I've touch too much neutral gray to the same spot, then I can go back in with some German gray and make it a little bit darker again. Stuff like that. Now you can see I swapped to another brush, to the bit pointless brush again. Pointless sounds a bit strange, but that's okay. Brush without a tip, without a sharp tip. That's better. And now I'm going over all the marks I made before and even smoothing them out a little bit more. But because they were so rough in the beginning, you can still see the texture. And that's what you're going for. You have to be able to go over a spot multiple times without losing your texture, and that's why you make them so rough in the beginning. And now I'm basically just making the cloak lighter and smoothing it out, but without losing that texture. And as you can see, I'm starting to stipple with the really old brush, because this brush has almost no tip left. You don't, if you stipple with a brush with a really sharp tip, you don't get a dot, you get a line. But because I'm stippling with this really old and frayed brush that has no point left, you get no lines, but just dots or flecks or rough, strange marks. And that's basically what you want. Another thing you might notice, you see me pick up the neutral gray from the wet palette. But then when I apply it to the cloak, it seems a lot lighter than the colors already on there. This is because the neutral gray, when it's wet, it is lighter, so it dries up a little bit darker, so it blends into the cloak and the colors you have already applied. But you have to keep this in mind, because when you're applying the paint like this, it seems lighter, so you might have the urge to tone it down and go back over with a darker color. But just keep it in mind, it's lighter when it's wet, so let it dry before you start trying to blend it in. Because, well, if you do that while the paint is still wet, you might get dark spots, and yeah, it can mess up your whole painting. And as I am stippling the paint, I'm really rubbing off most of the paint on my thumb. It's not dry brushing, but it's not normal painting as well. You really, you don't want as much paint in the tip of your brush, because you don't want to leave a really strong mark. You want to leave a softer mark, so try to be aware of that, and yeah, don't apply too much paint in one go. Just rub off the excess really well on your thumb or a pad or anything you want to use, basically. Now, if you look at the wet palette, you can see me making a mix of the neutral gray and the pale gray blue. I did this because I think the pale gray blue is a little bit too light for the cloak. The difference between the neutral gray and the pale gray blue is too big, and as I was painting with the neutral gray, I adjusted the scheme, so I just created a quick mix. I did use the same brush for this. Normally I would say take a really old brush, use a really old worn out brush as a mix brush, because mixing the paints, well, it's not good for your tip. But because I'm already painting with a really old brush, I didn't bother changing, because it's already worn out, so it didn't matter too much. And all I'm gonna do with this color is just pick out the edges that catch the most light to make them stand out a bit more, and keep stippling it on until I'm happy with the blend, the texture I created. And it really is just a lot of stippling. And you will notice I keep going back and forth between the mixture of the neutral gray and the pale gray blue, and just the neutral gray, just to create those blends a little bit better. Because I still find the step of my mixture of the neutral gray and pale gray blue a little bit harsh if it's just applied directly without any stippling of the neutral gray in between. And that is basically the inside of the cloak. So now we're moving on to the outside of the cloak. Well, because it's lizard skin and, well, it's a captain, it's Adrax Agatone, it's a Salamander captain, I went with the classic red, obviously. Now, I am starting off with just a base coat of whole red. Just paint all the skills whole red. It will take 2 layers, some spots maybe even 3, but just go over them all. And then after you've applied a nice opaque layer of the whole red over all the skills, you want to move on to Mephiston red. I really like Mephiston red. It's a really nice red color, but the added benefit is, it's gonna sound a bit weird, but it's a really translucent paint. Normally you'd say, but I want my paint to be opaque because I want solid, nice layers of a color. But with the Mephiston red, it's perfect that it's translucent. I want a transition, basically. So, because I've already painted them an opaque whole red, the translucency of the Mephiston red is really perfect in building up layers and creating a transition without even having to glaze. And that's what I'm doing now. So with the first layer you apply it on everywhere you want to be a little bit lighter. And then with the second layer of Mephiston red you're gonna apply over that first layer of Mephiston red. You're gonna make it a tiny bit smaller. And the third layer is gonna be a tiny bit smaller again as well. And in that way you create that really nice and smooth transition. And as you can see, when I'm applying the Mephiston red, I'm not making a sharp line over the whole red. I'm using a sort of feathery random brush strokes, and that helps with creating that transition. Because of my light source was top left, but it's the other side, it's the back side of the bottle. So you have to move your light source to top right, otherwise your lighting is going to be off. This means that the tops of the skills are picking up the most light. And that is why I'm also just painting the tops of the skills with the Mephiston red. And that's it. It's that simple. Because the paint is so nice and translucent, it creates the nice transitions. And if you paint it with those layers, and every layer a tiny bit smaller than the previous layer, you just ease that transition in. So you see from the whole red towards really nice Mephiston red, and then after that even some scarlet, and you can just really create a nice smooth color change. I am not 100% sure how many layers of the Mephiston red it will take, but you can also see it yourself and just continue until you're happy with the color you have. But it takes a lot of layers. I think it might have took 4 or 5 for me even, but I'm not 100% sure. You just have to continue till you're happy with the result. Now when you are happy with the Mephiston red you've built up, you can move on to the Evil Sun Scarlet. I'm not applying the Evil Sun Scarlet over the whole cloak, over all the scales, because this is the brightest color. I am applying this only on the scales that I think catch the most light. So you can see the cloak has folds on it, and I am picking out the top sides of those folds basically, and those scales I will pick out with the Evil Sun Scarlet, just to make them pop a little bit more and really emphasize the folds in the cloak, the rippling effect. And especially the big scales in the middle, they're, well, as I see them, they're the scales that are the spine, that were the spine of the lizard salamander dragon thing it was the cloak's made of basically. And those I pick out as well because they're really an eye catcher. So I really want those to pop. If you look at the back side of the model, I want to say, okay, that is what catches a lot of light. And with the Mephiston red as well, because you picked out the top sides of the scales towards your light source, you can already see a little bit of the color flowing, of the color movement. The upside of the fold in the cloak is lighter than the recess, the shadow, and that's what I'm emphasizing even more with this layer of Evil Sun Scarlet. And that is why I'm just picking out the scales I really want to pop and not everything, because then you destroy the effect you're trying to create already. And of course, with the Evil Sun Scarlet, you want it to be a smaller layer than you painted the Mephiston red in. Because you still want the Mephiston red showing. So just keep your application of the Evil Sun Scarlet a little bit smaller again as well. And there you can see as well, on that second fold, I'm just picking out those scales with the Evil Sun Scarlet as well. And just basically repeat this over the whole model. As a tiny final step, I added some wild ready red, but I really just only applied some dots to some of the edges of the scales, so the tips of the bigger scales, the spinal scales, and a few dots here and there of the scales that I want to pop. I want to really be the eye catcher, but it's just a really tiny amount. Just be careful you don't overdo it, because the wild rather red is already more orangey, and you want the scales to be red, not orange. That's basically it. That's what you do. And that was the video for the cloak. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.